A BC woman working from home was let go from her job after being accused of time theft and is now forced to pay $2,000 to her employer. But this has some employees suggesting if you are going to track my every move, then you should pay by the minute and not the hour. Alex Lucifero, employment lawyer at Samfiru Tumarkin LLP, joins us now to give us more insight. Good morning. Thanks for coming on the program, Alex. Okay, so first off, let's talk about this. What is time theft?
Well, I think it's what we all think it is, in the sense that it's your employer paying you for time that you're not working. Of course, pay in exchange for your work is a fundamental part, the most fundamental piece probably of the employment relationship. And so when you are being paid but not earning those wages, that of course is time theft. This has of course come up in the context most recently of work from home arrangements, where either on a full-time basis or on a part-time basis, employees are working from home and they're being tracked less than perhaps they would be in the office or on the factory floor.
Okay, so what rights do employees have when it comes to tracking programs?
Well, it's an interesting question in Ontario specifically. So there is legislation that was just introduced last year where employers do have to disclose how they're tracking employees. So this could be in a number of different ways. So on vehicles, for example, you could have GPS tracking software. Of course, on computers and electronic devices, you can have software that tracks every click, every movement. And so in that way, an employer has to let employees know what it is or isn't doing when it comes to tracking. You should be aware of those things as an employee and, of course, act accordingly.
Yeah, so it should be full disclosure here if you are being tracked. If your time at work is being tracked, you should know about this as an employee.
Yes.
Okay, so do you see this as an advantage if employers are to pay employees by the minute? Who's at more of an advantage here?
I actually don't think it's an advantage. I see it as potentially eroding a fundamental piece of that employment relationship which is trust, ultimately. There needs to be a line there where, to a large extent, an employer does have to trust an employee that they're being productive, that they're doing the work that they need to do. And of course, the result will always be how productive that employee is or isn't. I think by that very metric, you can tell whether that employee is effectively and efficiently and using the time that they have. I think certain industries perhaps could implement that by the minute pay structure. I think it wouldn't work in the vast majority of industries and businesses, and I actually would not recommend it to employers. I think there has to be some degree of trust there, while at the same time, of course, acknowledging that employers do have the right to oversee and to track that employee's work and productivity.
On that note, here we are talking about that possibility of being tracked on how much time you work down to the minute, being paid by the minute. What's the best way to move forward?
I think the best way to move forward is to effectively strike the balance between those two competing positions. And this is across the board when it comes to any issue in the employment relationship. There needs to be a bit of give and take on both sides. And so, of course, again, an employer needs to be able to track your productivity, track your efficiency, track the work that you're doing. At the same time, as an employer, it is in your best interest to provide that employee with a bit of freedom, with a bit of room for maneuver. And that's how, at least in my opinion, you actually get employees to be most productive. Now, again, there will be cases, and we saw this case out of BC, where the exception will ultimately justify the rule, where some employees will take advantage of that freedom that's provided. And of course, employers need to be able to implement disciplinary measures in those kinds of cases. But in the vast majority of industries and cases, I think that balance could be struck.
Yeah, strike that balance, allow that level of trust between employee and employer. Because once you start getting into that nitty-gritty, it seems like there is that level of trust is eroded.
And it might actually lower productivity and lower an employee's commitment to the cause, to the business.
Alex Lucifero, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this chat. And employment lawyer Alex Lucifero, thank you so much.
My pleasure.